how should you approach saves in 2021, and a recap of the LABR Mixed Auction League draft. We'll talk to Alex Fast of Pitcher List next on Beat the Shift. Welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always, Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Coming right off the LABR Mixed Auction that you and I did together. How you feel so far?
I think we both did well. I think it was a little exhausting, and I think it was a lot of fun. I think we actually did pretty well. I think we constructed our team very well, and I think that we zigged when we should have zagged a couple times, but we did that because that's the way the draft went.
Yeah, I'm a little bit hoarse just talking to you during the whole thing, but we have somebody else who did it with someone else. Alex Fast is on the line, Vice President of Pitcher List. Welcome to the show, Alex.
You guys, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be back. It feels like we've all run a marathon together. It really feels like we all we all went through the grind together and we all made it out the other side, and here we are.
Yeah. So today on the show, we're going to do our talk about relief pitchers and how to actually draft relief pitchers, a couple of closer situations that are worthy. But let's talk a little bit about our auction draft that just happened, just to see if we can take some general information down. Maybe we see something that's going on for this year. Maybe we picked up on anything, and maybe some good things that you did, some bad things that you did, so on and so forth. So Alex, you drafted with Nick Pollock, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what was your first reaction here?
Yeah, it's funny. So Nick and I, last year, the first time we did LABR, Nick was unable to come down to Florida. So what we did is we had so much game planning. We spent, the 5 or 6 nights together on coming down on the plane, spending the nights in the hotel room together, really coming up with this rigid game plan. And then just because of, my involvement in Tout and everything going the way that it is with the pandemic and the 6.0 launch, we didn't get on the same page until maybe a day or so before the draft. And I think we both kind of embraced you know what, we're going to come into this and we're going to see how the auction unfolds, because you guys have done plenty of these. You know that sometimes There's really no way of predicting how it's going to go. And in some ways that benefited us, and in some ways that didn't benefit us. One of the ways I think that it did benefit us is I think we were a little more willing to go the extra dollar earlier on for certain guys. And I don't know if you guys got the impression, but I don't know if I've ever been a part of an auction where more money came off the table so quickly. It felt like within 2 hours, everyone was almost near or at $100. Did you guys feel that way?
Well, the first round, the money went in the first round, the first 12 picks. They were going so much that we actually had to alter our plan. We had an initial plan of nominating a certain player, and we weren't able to because we decided not to, because we thought that if we nominated this player, it would be ridiculously high. The prices were so insane that any player that was nominated just went so much higher than everyone else would.
Yeah. So but before what we do before the auction is we come up obviously with our own set of values that we think a player is worth, but we also have an estimate as to what we think the market would pay. For this we took pretty much NFBC ADP because that's very comparable to this. This is a 5x5 standard draft here. We took as many 12-team leagues as we can find because that's more comparable. And in terms of the prices, I took last year's mixed LABR results, 1 through 200, just to get the curve. So because these are the same players as last year. So if, let's say, the top player went for 50 last year, I set the top ADP at $50 this year. Mm-hmm. And the next player went 48 last year, whatever the number 2 ADP was, 48 this year. And so on and so on, so on and so forth, all the way down, just to get a pretty good feel for how prices would go. What I noticed here was that our ADP values were pretty spot on for players, except for the first 15 picks. I thought that the first 15 picks that went, the first round and a half or so, were way above. We're talking $5, $6, way above what I even thought would be very high, which was even more above what I was willing to pay for anyone. So that's what I noticed. And I've been to auctions that do this. I've also been to very tame auctions that, you know what, it's a little bit lower than what I projected, and in that case, I do want to play up high. So I did want to go through whatever reaction I had and go with it, but I really prepared for a certain amount, and when we saw, just as Ruvain said, when we saw that the first 15 were going too high, we altered our nomination strategy and said, we're not nominating a player that we want. We ain't going to get him. It's going to go way over.
Yeah, definitely. We felt the same way. I mean, until kind of obviously at the end of the draft there, where it was like, all right, let's just get some of these big names off the board. And, it's funny because, well, two things. One, the way that I prepared for Tout and the way that I prepared a little bit for LABR were very similar in that, follow the guy who writes the articles who wins the leagues, and that's you, Ariel, right? And figure out what the strategy is, right? And it was really beneficial then for me to pull the ATC values as updated as I could get them, put them into the Fangraphs auction calculator, and then that gave me a good idea as to maybe what your threshold was going to be for certain players. Because I think there were a few players in the middle where it was, me, you, and Nick, and Ruben, obviously, going back and forth on things and being able to find that threshold. So I have to thank you for that, because that information really changes how people come into drafts. And then the other thing is, what do you do in a league when Jake Seeley is in it, when it comes to pitching? You know what I mean? Like, there's no way. You kind of have to think to yourself, like, okay, I'm not going to be able to get, in all likelihood, who knows, of course, I'm not going to be able to get the best ERA and whip and strikeouts if one guy has Bauer, Bieber, and Scherzer. It could very well happen, of course. Right. But how did you, I'm curious to hear, how did you guys adjust knowing that, okay, we might not win it, but we still want to come damn as close to as we can?
Well, we loved it. We loved the fact that he took those guys, because you know what? Most of those guys that he took were not in our plan, and if it wasn't in our plan, then it didn't affect us at all. Not only that, it took all his money off the board. He was literally sitting around doing nothing for almost an hour, just waiting for all the values to come back down, and we were able to get the pitching that we still wanted because our plan happened to not coincide to his plan, so it worked out.
Yeah, and one of the things that I did last year with LABR and Tout is I scouted other players, not so much to know what player they're gonna pick. I don't really need to know that. I'm more interested in where they're gonna play. And Jake Seeley, we knew was gonna just go nuts on some top pitching. He was just going to go there. So I did not want to get into a bidding war, and I did not want to create a plan with Ruvain on picking any of the big players. So our plan was get a mid-20s player, get a low-20s player, get a high-teens player for pitching, because there'd be less people around that area to fight. Same thing with the very top hitters. We weren't not interested in playing in the $48 range, which you guys took Mookie Betts. Seeley took Ronald Acuna at 51. Mike Trout went for 47 to Brian Feldman. We were not interested in playing in that area and going for bidding war, so our plan was a little bit different. So that's where scouting really helps. If you know the players, if you play in the same league with guys every year, and you know where people like to play, doesn't matter about the exact players that they like. It matters where they like to play in dollars. We have a home league where one gentleman just does the same thing every year, where he just bids 3 top hitters and 2 top pitchers and goes dollar days. Well, we're not going to get involved in a lot of those bidding wars, and that's one thing I learned.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think if I recall correctly, last year one of the players that we bid the most on was Christian Yelich, and I don't think we went even that crazy on him. And this year it was kind of like, it's funny. I'm in a few leagues this year, as I'm sure both of you are as well. And I think one of the things that I'm trying to do is just like really try and approach each one differently, because I've kind of found in the past couple of years, and you guys can let me know if you feel the same way, that like, you come up with your projections and you try and make them as accurate as possible, but sometimes because you're following these projections, some of your teams can look a little bit too similar. You know what I mean? Oh, sure. I actually end up getting this guy where I want to because I think he's always a really good value. So I allowed Nick to push me a little bit more out of my comfort zone than I usually would, and that would include going $48 on a guy like Mookie Betts. That would include, going like $30 on a guy like Manny Machado, although I don't think that's like the worst thing in the world. No. So I think for me, it was kind of like, all right, I'm going to have I'm gonna take a different approach here, especially when it came to pitching. I mean, like I was talking to Nick, like we don't really have an SP3. You know, I'm very confident with Nola and Lynn. I think that's a very fine start, but we don't have an SP3. Soroka has that upside, of course, if he can prove to be healthy. That's of course a major question mark. Tyler Mahle, wonderful upside. Aaron Savali, wonderful upside. But once again, to reiterate, no real SP3, which put us into a tricky situation. It's why we got Syndergaard at the end there, hoping that maybe by June we could have that kind of SP3 there for us. Were you guys as concerned with, Buehler and Glasnow Lamet upside through the roof, all three with either innings pitch concerns from Buehler or injury risks with Glasnow and Lamet?
Yeah. For me, the values that we got from this, if you project the innings that ATC projected, which are not a lot of innings for either of these pitchers. I know if they pitch full seasons, if they pitch more, which is a very good possibility, these guys are worth even more. They were a bargain at the values we projected. Whenever you have, and the tip for other people, whenever you have a pitcher with a projection, and it's based on a lower amount of innings, do the math, do the sensitivity test. If you add 10 innings, where does this value go? If you drop 10 innings, where does this value go? And if the cost is fine for the innings that you draft. So, for example, we got Lamet at $14. We projected him as about an $18 pitcher with about 130 innings. If he's only going to pitch 110 innings, he's still worth that $14 cost from the ratios he puts up. So you want a sensitivity test how the innings are going to go to see at what price point can you still buy the player and you can still have a number of innings gone. That's how I look at it.
Well, another thing, though, we went into this. We did not think we were going to get Lamet. We didn't think we were going to get Walker Buehler. We actually, it came on the fly. We're like, you know what? Let's bid and let's see how high we can go or how high we're willing to go. And you know what? Buehler happened to fall on our laps. We weren't thinking we were going to get him. We came in thinking, we want to go a little bit lower, maybe start with a Luis Castillo type pitcher, just a drop lower. We don't want one of the top main pitchers, but it just happened that way. I mean, Alex, did you think you were going to have Nola being the head of your staff?
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't necessarily. Nick was like kind of more all about that. I kind of wanted to go either the extra dollar for Buehler or the extra dollar for Darvish. I personally believe in the changes that Nola made last year. I really believe in the increased changeup usage. I believe in how his curveball was able to sit high in terms of swinging strike rate, one of the higher in his career, and kind of turn that around. And I also think that he's going to give us a good amount of innings. Overall, I mean, I think the thing is, after we got Nola and Lynn, I think I was really comfortable where we were at in terms of a wins and innings pitched floor. And then from there, I wanted to get a little bit riskier. I think the thing that I got most upset about was not being able to get a guy like McCullers, who actually I am very high on coming into the year.
We knew you were going to go for him at some point also.
Yeah, he was just someone that I really thought that we could try to go the extra dollar on. It was funny. It's just one of those drafts where when it felt like we should go the extra dollar, we went for the extra dollar at the wrong time, and the times where we should have gone for the extra dollar, we didn't. And it seemed like we weren't necessarily on the same page, which was good. I mean, I don't think Nick's going to have any problem with me saying this. It's not like we were contentious throughout the draft. It just didn't. I don't know if it necessarily ended up. We might have been playing on our heels a bit more than we wanted to.
Right. What was your biggest regret of the draft?
Doing it. No. My biggest regret of the draft. It's a great question. Probably going the extra dollar or two on Stanton. I mean, okay. Stanton's a guy that if it finally happens, if we finally see him play the games that he's supposed to play, then yes, he can exceed that value. But to not only have that liability, but in a spot in which, he can't really be shifted out of, it just doesn't afford you the flexibility that you really want. So I wasn't absolutely in love with that. And then, just not having that SP3. So I don't know if that really coincides with a pick. That might be just more so on the picks that the pitchers that we missed out on. But I would say those are the two biggest regrets I have.
Right. Ruvain, what do you think the biggest regret was for you?
I think the biggest regret that we got was Salvador Perez. We wanted a catcher.
Yeah.
We only wanted to spend about $10 on a catcher, and we ended up spending $18 on Salvador Perez. We were like, okay, we valued him at, let's say, I think we valued him at either 16 or 17, and we valued him and we're like, okay, we're at 14, okay, we're at 16, and whoops, we went too much and we went overboard, and it sort of played into how we dealt with the rest of our draft, because we, at that point, we only had, I think, one or two outfielders, and it affected our whole entire outfield, that we had to find players that are going to fit us properly and that we can have the right amount of money left, because it just screwed up our whole entire budget. But we had money to play with, because we ended up not going, big with. We got one big closer, which we actually tried to freeze the room, and I think we did freeze the room with Edwin Diaz at 17.
Yes.
No one else wanted him, so we did that, which actually helped us, plan out the rest of the thing. And because of that, our pitching is, I don't like our starting pitchers that much. I mean, yes, we have three top good ones, but we actually bulked up on relievers because we didn't like our pitchers so much, our starting pitchers.
We'll talk about relievers in a second, but yeah, that was my biggest regret also. The thing about catchers, especially in a two-catcher league, is there's some sense of the fact that there's a replacement level, that the 30th catcher really stinks. And when you're paying, you're not paying for the actual stats of a catcher. You're paying for the privilege not to draft the 30th best catcher. And the question is, what does the market want? How does it bump up? If we pay $18 for Salvador Perez, that's fine, as long as everybody else in the market is going a little bit higher than they should, right? It matters what the rest of the room is doing. Problem is, we didn't gauge that market premium correctly on the catchers. JT Realmuto went for 18. We paid 18 for Salvador Perez. Wilson Contreras, 14. Next catcher, Yasmani Grandal, 7. So you can see that the market premium was less than we paid. We paid more.
Will Smith at 11, by the way, too.
Will Smith at 11, right. I would much rather have Will Smith at 11 or Grandal 7 than the Salvador Perez at 18. Problem is that, he came up and, at that point we needed some power and we had the money. So, figured let's do that, and hopefully somebody will go crazy on Will Smith, and then it would make our numbers look well. Hard to gauge that. We did a poor job of gauging the market premium. We probably should have stuck to our intuition that the value would have come out of somebody like Grandal and Contreras, somewhere in the middle. But I like our second catcher, Dalton Varsho, for $2. The reason why I like him is that he's not going to play catcher. He's going to play outfield. He's going to have a lot more at-bats than almost anybody else in the catcher field. And it's all about the counting stats. So good $2 bid in the end, I thought.
Yeah, I dig that as well. That's why I don't think anyone, I was curious about Carson Kelly too, just because I don't know how many at-bats he's going to lose. Maybe when Dalton Varsho does move to outfield, which I do think he's going to pretty quick, he should get some good time there. But I was actually very shocked that Grandal didn't shoot up a little bit more. When I saw that he was going at 7, I was like, wow, that just seems like, with that team behind him, he always seems like he's kind of a guy that people are reaching for. So I thought that was really interesting. Same with Travis d'Arnaud, to be honest. I really thought he was going to exceed $10, maybe have, after the season that he had last year. So that was a little surprising to me as well.
And what we actually tried to do though is, after we got Salvador Perez, we actually started nominating catchers that we thought had a higher ADP than what we valued them. So hopefully they would go higher, but that didn't work out.
Yeah, listen, you're going to get some things wrong, and it's not that he was the wrong player. He actually fits our team. Our team is actually light on power. We've got plenty of steals. We've got Kyle Lewis.
Yeah.
We've got, who else we have?
Dylan Moore.
Sorry, so not Kyle Lewis. We have Dylan Moore. We have Tim
Trent
Anderson,
Grisham.
Trent Grisham, Raimiel Tapia. We've got plenty of steals.
Yeah.
So Salvador Perez actually does fit our team for what we need in the end. But, just at the time, I didn't like the price. We weren't planning on going heavy in the middle infield, but the value just came there. We got a nice Tim Anderson early by... I think the big thing about Tim Anderson is that we brought him out earlier than Bichette, earlier than Lindor, earlier than Whit Merrifield. And because he was brought out earlier, people probably didn't go the extra buck or two thinking, I'll just wait for one of those other guys who I like better anyways. And that left the Tim Anderson bargain for us, and that let us go a couple of extra bucks on Xander Bogaerts and really lock down some of those counting stats with him.
Yeah, definitely. I thought that was a really wise strategy, and that is a fun way to do it. I mean, I think that's actually one of my favorite parts about an auction is who am I going to nominate to screw over the other people the most? You know what I mean? Last year, my strategy was very, very much like I know people are going to spend on closers. Like it happens every year. So I actually think that was removed from me this year because there's such a wider knowledge of the volatility of the market, when it comes to relievers this year. So I wasn't able to rely on that crutch quite as much.
Right. So we're going to talk about relievers today, but one thing that we did was we got 4 closers. 4 closers on a 12-team team. If you do the math, you really only need about 2 or 2.5 or 3 closers. We decided to go quantity over quality. We got the high-up Edwin Diaz, and then we went Rafael Montero, Anthony Bass, and Joaquin Soria for some cheap amounts, taking a couple of stabs. Tonight, we're going to talk our strategy section about closers, and I'll throw it out to you. I know that you did a great presentation last year at right around this time of year at First Pitch about closers are terrible investment bargains. They are just money losers. How can we draft closers? So what is your general strategy of what you do in drafts or auctions?
Yeah, it's such a funny question. Like, obviously, you came to that, and it was awesome to have you there. I think didn't I meet both of you then, or Reuven? Did I meet you later at?
Yeah. No, you met me. I was there. You met
That was
me there.
Yeah, because I always get that and the other event. That I was confused. I keep complaining, like, okay, well, the ideal thing is to go to a saves hold league. The ideal thing is to go to a saves hold league, and then I've gotten to tout, and it was a saves hold league, and I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I gotta put my money where my mouth is. I think usually what I do in leagues like this is if I try and get the guy who either is the sure thing or is on a team where he's got people ahead of him who are elite enough that they're going to stay there and he's always going to maintain that closer's role. Like one guy who actually comes to mind for me this year is Kenley Jansen, right? He's got so many fantastic relievers ahead of him that he's like unarguably not the best reliever on the LA Dodgers, right? So they're going to be able to use Blake Trinan, Brusdal Gratterall, Joe Kelly, maybe even Corey Knebel, Victor Gonzalez as well in high leverage situations, leaving Kenley Jansen the 9th inning, right? So I think he's a guy that's valuable. Obviously, your Liam Hendricks is really valuable, but then there's a guy like Nick Anderson who's the polar opposite of a Kenley Jansen, right? When I see the best reliever on a team is in the 9th inning spot, then I'm like, okay, there's a good chance he might not be the saves leader because as you mentioned in that presentation, as we see year in and year out and year in and year out, saves are being more evenly distributed across the bullpen than ever before, right? I can't quite accurately look at the 2020 sample size and say that continued because obviously it's way too small, but I can almost imagine that it's going to happen again because, I mean, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. It feels like there are more nebulous situations involved in bullpens this year really than ever before, right? Those guys that are the quote-unquote lockdown capital C closers, they really feel like they're much more few and far between this year than ever before.
Yeah, no doubt. What I've seen is that in general, and of course this year, as you said, is even worse this year. But the best investments come from not the elite closers. We're not talking about like Hendricks at the very top or Hader, but the second tier that are locked down. So for me, it was Iglesias and Diaz this year. Those are probably the ones that are going to be more locked down. Now, I think Edwin Diaz brings another dimension to the game because of the strikeouts. Right? You're getting 100-plus strikeouts in a year, which is almost like an SP4. So it just saves you from having to pick these high strikeout guys. You can focus, if you have Diaz on your squad, you can focus on more ratios on your pitching staff and forget about strikeouts, and it allows you to do that. But the key in return on investment is you either want high return or you want low investment. The cheaper people, to me, are the way to go, especially in a 12-team mixed league. So what we did is we picked 3 darts. We got Edwin Diaz, who's going to lock it down. That's our base. And instead of trying to pay up for that middle tier, let's just throw some darts. Here's the other thing I will say. Everyone says that closers and saves are volatile, but the truth of the matter is it's less volatile in the first month because usually there is a set closer and he's not losing his job in the first week of the season. So if you have 4 guys who have the role to start, even if they stink and get thrown out half the way in the year, you're starting the year with saves. So if you don't have to play 2 closers, 3 closers, 4 closers. You get a choice. If I had 7 closers, I could play 7 closers. I want to front end the closers. I want to play more starting pitchers later on, more closers earlier. Because early in the season, I don't really know if starters are good. Right? I'd rather only play 5 starting pitchers who I know are solid rather than putting a 6th and a 7th for volume. Why do that earlier on? Pick a closer and throw in an extra closer or 2 who I know is going to get the save opportunity. And later on in the year, you can make up the innings by not having a closer. If one of your closers gets traded or one of your closers loses a job, so if you're down from 4 to 3, you've already played it and used up his saves ability, and then you can stick an extra starter later on. And by the way, you'll know which teams have good lineups and bad lineups, and you can stream a lot better. It's easier to stream in July than it is in April. So you might as well play that to your advantage and set yourselves up to play closers earlier and more starters later.
I will say, though, that does sound as if you're coming from predominantly a roto standpoint, though, right?
Yes, for
Yes.
sure.
That's so that's an important caveat, too, because I feel like if you are going from head to head, you might not have that luxury because theoretically those guys who are losing those jobs are technically doing so because they were insufficient in that role. So you might have to spend a little bit more. I mean, it feels weird to even say that because overall, I definitely agree with your take. Like, it's fine to take those lower guys. Like, usually the guys that I would target are the good closers on poor teams. You know what I mean? Like, before Joe Jimenez was really poor, there was a stretch where he was a really great get. You know, there was always a guy in the Kansas City Royals, albeit last year you could have gotten, I think it was Rosenthal last year, right? You could have gotten him, or usually there have been times where the Orioles have had really great closers. Even though they haven't been a great team, guys like the Pirates have had good closers. So that's kind of like why I like what you did with Anthony Bass. Like, he's the perfect example of someone that people think like, oh well, it's the Marlins. They're probably not going to win a lot of games. Why would I go ahead and get Anthony Bass if he keeps that role? I mean, yeah, he could be quite the steal for you.
Well, that's what we're doing. We were actually toward the end of the draft. We were targeting these lower end team closers. We're looking for the Rich Rodriguez type. We're looking for the Anthony Bass type because you know what? Even they have to get some wins. They are going to get some saves. If they get some saves, 15 to 20 saves, that's great. And if one of these teams start out hot and they start out doing well, like the Royals did, I think in 2019, and Shane Green racked up all these. Not the Royals, the Tigers. He racked up all these saves in April. It just builds you such a huge buffer for later in the season. Plus, Ariel, I want to add something with what you said. You want a return on investment. Well, I know one of the articles you wrote was that for FAB, one of the best returns on investments are picking up relief pitchers. Now, usually the turnover is probably going to be in May or June, and that's when you start seeing the turnover. But you know what? For those first 2 months, just like you said, you're going to be able to get those counting stats. If the closers lose their jobs, you're not losing those saves. You may lose the player in that position, but you're not losing the saves, and it's 100% worth it to just hold on to the named closers for opening day just for at least 1 or 2 months.
Yeah. The thing about FAB is that closers are good investments on the waiver wire if you don't overspend on the waiver wire, right? If you're going to spend 15% of your budget on a closer on the waiver wire, that does not become a good investment. If you only invest 5% of your budget on a closer, it becomes a good investment. So the trick is to see some potential closers somewhere in the middle of the season and float them in when either a closer's struggling or whatnot, and get those guys on your squad cheaper, a week earlier if you can, and then they become good investments. The waiver wire investments, I think, are the worst. Or the, oh my God, they just brought up this prospect. Everybody grab him.
Yeah.
And it goes in a frenzy. How many times did that turn to success? Yes, Juan Soto was a huge success. Absolutely. Doesn't happen as often as you think, and people waste an enormous amount of budget on them. FAB is one of the better, closers are one of the better investments on FAB that you can do. So one question to you, Alex, is how much is a relief pitcher's ratios, what he does in terms of strikeouts, ERA and WHIP, and I'd say even strikeout ratio as well. How much of it are those numbers a concern for you when you're drafting, or are you really just almost all of it looking at what his closer role is and will he get a save?
Usually, to be honest, it actually is the latter, but I think it's entirely contextual about how you're building your SP staff, right? If you're filling it with volatile pitchers who have really high ceilings but really low floors, I prefer to anchor that with guys who are going to be better ratio guys, right? So if you want to get like a Devin Williams in a saves hold league, or if you want to get like a Liam Hendricks or even like an Edwin Diaz for the strikeouts, I think that gives you the opportunity to say, okay, you know what? I can actually afford a Tyler Mahle. I can actually afford, I don't know, like a maybe like an, I don't know, Eliezer Hernandez or someone who's got like a large floor, large ceiling as well. Now, if you're in the opposite direction where, you know, you're drafting a little bit more conservatively than, or actually I should say, excuse me, if the SPs have a little bit better of a floor, I'm really just kind of getting those stats. I just want to gather as many saves as possible. So I really think it just kind of comes down to how you personally prefer to draft.
Yeah, Ruvain, what about you? And another question for you, Ruvain, is at what point, or would you draft a very valuable middle reliever instead of a named closer, even if it's not a great one?
I think it depends on your whole roster construction. If you're light on strikeouts from your starting pitching, then you know what? Those higher leverage relievers that get all the strikeouts, they're going to benefit you a lot. Like a couple of years ago, Dellin Betances was one of the most valuable relief pitchers, and I think he maybe had 1 or 2 saves the entire season. I think it was Trevor Miller. When he was doing really well, he was so good. He was so
Andrew
valuable,
Miller.
and he wasn't
Andrew Miller.
Andrew Miller. Sorry, Trevor Miller didn't make it. I'm sorry, Trevor Miller didn't pitch well at all. It was Andrew Miller. Andrew Miller, when he was with the Red Sox for a little bit, and he was with the I think it was with the Orioles as well. He just did so well, and he racked up so many strikeouts, and he was just so valuable. And he was able to. You can play that type of pitcher if you don't like a pitcher that's starting that week. They have a bad matchup or something like that. You throw that guy in, he can get the equivalent amount of strikeouts for that bad start pitcher, and keep your ERA and WHIP intact.
Yeah, so my feeling is that the math tells you that there are middle relievers who are worth playing even if they don't get saves.
Mm-hmm.
However, I would not pay for them at a draft. I would not spend any draft capital.
Yes.
Because, sure, you can pay for an Andrew Miller and you can pay for a middle reliever that's awesome, but you don't have to. There's always going to be somebody that is going to turn into the next Devin Williams that you can get in season for nothing. I mean, I got Devin Williams in like 3 leagues last year for nothing. I picked him up on the waiver wire. You're better off not spending draft capital rather than putting any money to it in the draft. Now, that's not to say that I think it's a bad idea to draft the middle reliever. I sometimes do that. If I don't have enough closers and I don't particularly love my starting pitching staff, I will draft a middle reliever to help my ratios in the first week, but I'll do it with the very last pick. I won't spend any amount of draft capital whatsoever. Why have to?
Yeah, I really couldn't agree more. I mean, how many people can honestly say before all of the drafts in 2020 that Devin Williams was a guy that they were targeting? You know what I mean? That Devin Williams was a guy who was going to be the guy. And you're right. There are just, especially in bullpens nowadays, go take your pick of anyone in the Rays bullpen and you're going to be fine. You can get an Aaron Bummer. You can get an Emmanuel Clase. Like, all of those guys are free in regular 12-team leagues. You don't need, and to be honest, that's also kind of why I don't mind taking guys who, especially if you have enough IL spots, who are going to be on the IL a little bit earlier, barring, assuming you can get them late enough in drafts, because then you can fill those spots either with those middle relievers or with starting pitchers who have easy schedules to start the year, assuming that that's going to be your one streaming spot.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about some specific closer situations. And Tampa Bay is a very interesting one because I don't think that they're going to pick one. I think that they're actually literally going to have Anderson have a couple of saves, Castillo have a couple of saves, Fairbanks have a couple of saves, and maybe the ball boy in left field have a couple of saves, and the guy giving the towels have a couple of saves. And that brings us to the injury guru's trivia question of the week.
So the Rays are very different than every other major league team. They use so many different pitchers to close games. Alex, this is a specific question to you. Let's see if you know this answer. How many Rays collected a save last year?
How many Rays? So in
60
the
game season.
60-game season. How many Rays collected a save?
Okay, so I'm pretty sure that in the 2019 it was 11. So if it was 11 in 2019, I'm gonna say that it was about half that, and I'll say 5.
No, it's more than that.
It's more than that. You were close when you said 11. It was 12. 12
Get
pitchers
outta here.
picked up a save.
12
Look at the
guys.
stats. 12 guys had at least one save on the Rays.
That
So
crazy?
and
They
the top six, I
passed
think,
their mark. Oh my!
They had 12.
In,
Yes,
in,
Anthony-
in a third of the season, 60
Oh
games.
my God!
Right?
But,
I mean,
you know what? It worked. They got to the World Series. It worked. They mixed and they matched. And just because they don't have a set closer, it doesn't mean it doesn't work. If a pitcher gets hot, Kevin Cash will just go with him, and that's exactly what he's going to do. He's going to use that pitcher until he's not hot anymore, or he decides the analytics are not right for him anymore, and they'll just change it around. And it seems to work. And you know what? When was the last time the Rays actually paid for a bullpen guy? I mean, you want to talk about maybe Fernando Rodney was the last guy they actually paid for somebody to be in the bullpen? All their guys, they're bringing up these guys who throw 100 miles an hour, and each one of them can get a save. Peter Fairbanks is worth a lot. Diego Castillo is worth a lot. Nick Anderson, they all have great ratios, and anyone can close on any team in the majors, not just the Rays.
No, just so much so too that they even got rid of Alvarado too. They were like, "Yeah, we don't need him. We got plenty of others."
yeah, it's crazy.
And Angel Pagan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Emilio Pagan.
I'm sorry, I'm mixing up all the names. It was a long draft. I'm sorry.
Here's what I do notice about the Rays. If you look at the pricing and what the ATC shows against what they're really going for in the market, even with a reduced save count, like I have Peter Fairbanks pegged for 10 saves, okay, which is a share of the saves, a third, a quarter, whatever it is. He's still a bargain if you buy him where he's going, which is almost free in a 12-team league and close to free in a 15-team mixed league. Diego Castillo, also 13 saves. He's still a bargain. He's like a $6 auction price in what we just did a 12-team league, but he's going for like $1. Nick Anderson, also a bargain if you give him just about a third of the saves share. So these guys have good ratios and will give you a hint of saves. That's actually very valuable, and I think more valuable people think. I think that people are shying away from these guys saying, well, I don't know who it's going to be. It's going to be everybody. But if you combine the ratios plus the fact that I think that they're all guaranteed a save share, and it's going to happen, right? They're all going to get 10, at least 10 or so. Mm-hmm. I think that they're still of value.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, are you guys particularly anti-saves hold leagues? Is there a place for them, or you're okay with them?
I'm okay with them.
I'm okay. I don't think we've ever played in one because it's just so relatively new. But it's interesting. It's an interesting idea. It's just like having a win/quality start type league because not all pitchers go 5 innings anymore.
Yeah, I'm more interested in a wins quality starts league than saves hold. I think that's more of an important issue today. But to me, I'm of the opinion of give me the rules and I'll find a way to win. You know, I'll take on that kind of thing. I want to move to the Minnesota bullpen. I personally think that Minnesota is going to do the same thing that Tampa Bay is doing. You know, Ron Gardenhire is an analytics guy from the Rays, right? I think that this is going to be a situation where they have Colomé, they have Rogers, they've got Duffy, Robles to a lesser extent, and they're going to just mix and match, and Colomé is going to get a share, and Rogers is going to get a share. Maybe Colomé will get more than half, but he's not going to get a full season worth. I really think they're going to do the same thing. Your thoughts?
Yeah, for me personally, I kind of think that this harkens to a situation that we were kind of talking about before where it's almost like what the Braves had done in the past, where like Mark Melancon wasn't necessarily always their best closing option, but he always got the saves because they were using their more high leverage guys earlier. Their Will Smiths, their Chris Martins a little bit earlier. And I think we can probably both agree that when it comes to pure stuff, Taylor Rogers is the better pitcher, right, than Alex Colomé. Alex Colomé has the cutter that's been working for him forever, and Taylor Rogers is the slider, and that's pretty much it, but a nice slider slider, 16.1% swing strike rate last year, about 20% swing strike rate in 2019. So for me, I think it's going to be like when it comes to an actual save situation and they made it to the ninth, then Rogers may get there. But I wouldn't be surprised if he was utilized more as the fireman throughout the year, leaving Colomé more of the bulk of the saves by the year's end.
You agree, Ruvain?
Well, I think it's going to be a big issue with the lefty-righty issue here. I think because Rogers is a lefty and because Colomé is a righty, and there's still the 3-batter minimum rule, I think that Colomé will get the bulk of the saves, but Rogers may come in and get like an inning and a third save. Colomé may only pitch the ninth inning, but I can see Rogers going the full inning and a third, that type of thing, because he's a lefty. I think they even may try to get Hansel Robles right again. He can be a good pitcher. When he's with the Mets, not so much. When he's with the Angels, he was actually very good and very effective. And if they can get him in the right frame of mind, they can turn him around like they've done in other people with that bullpen, then I think he is a sleeper to get some saves also.
Angels have turned some people into good pitchers, I'll tell you that. No, so if I had to guess, it's going to be 2/3, 1/3. But I think that what they're going to do is, I think that it's going to be your day. Colomé will go 2 of the days, Rogers will go 1 of the day, and they'll alternate. I really think they're going to do that situation. Let's do 4 more quick hits, just quickly what do you think's going on. The Atlanta situation. I think Will Smith is more of a thing than Martin, but unclear. If I had to bet on anybody, I would bid Will Smith, but I'm not fully into either of them.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, I don't think any of those guys I'm really spending the price at their current ADP, because I think that could be more of an even 50-50 split. In saves hold leagues, I think both of them are highly valuable. And I give him Chris Martin. I'm a little out because of where they're going right now. I think they both have nice upside.
Right. Of course, we're talking about saves-only leagues here. Mm-hmm. If you're in a saves-plus-hold leagues, these guys are all gems. I mean, Taylor Rogers is a phenomenal player in the saves-plus-hold league. Yeah. Right? It doesn't really matter where he comes in, he's going to get it. Any of the guys in the Rays are fantastic also. So it's really it's a more of a bigger problem for the saves-only. Ruvain, you agree?
Well, I think they're going to do more of what the Rays do, and I think they have a couple other closers on this roster that they can use. I mean, A.J. Minter was very good last year. A.J. Minter was their quote-unquote anointed closer 2 years ago. He's a sleeper to close. And Luke Jackson, he didn't do that great as a closer for a whole period of time. He's not a strikeout guy, but he racked up a whole bunch of saves and was very valuable a couple years ago.
He put on like 15 men every time he came up. Jeff Erickson had a term, he called him Action Jackson.
But he got the job done.
Right. St. Louis, you outbid us and won Jordan Hicks in the LABR auction. I guess you think he's the guy.
I do. It's funny. Every time we think that the Cardinals seem like they're going to make the more analytically driven decision, they don't. Like, it seems like they might just be one of those organizations that still believes in like capital C closer. I think Hicks has the best stuff of all of them, although Ryan Helsley and Giovanni Gallegos, I think, obviously have great stuff as well. Hicks, I think, you guys clearly remembered because you were bidding there with us. His stuff is electric, right? His stuff is absolutely electric. He's closer stuff. I don't really see Alex Reyes getting the bulk of those shares. I still think they might want to turn him into a long relief guy. This is all conjecture, of course, but if I'm a betting man like I was tonight, I'm putting my money on Hicks.
Yeah, we had Stefania Bell on the show earlier this week, and she thinks that Hicks looks fine, and because of the layoff from last year, is in a better shape. You agree, Ruvain?
Yeah, his velocity, I think he threw the ball 102 the other day. I think he's perfect. I think he's perfectly fine. I think he's healthy. But I think they're going to try to ease him back into the close role. He's not going to pitch every other day. He's going to pitch every other day. He's not going to pitch through 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row. So you're going to see people like Giovanni Gallegos getting some saves. You're going to see maybe Andrew Miller. Now I got it right this time. The Andrew Miller get a couple saves here and there because, they're going to have some doubleheaders this season. It's 7-inning games, and they're going to try to use these pitchers and have like just a bullpen game sometimes where you have possibly John Gant starting a game, pitching 3-4 innings, give it to Ryan Helsley, let Andrew Miller see if he can finish the game so they can save the rest of the bullpen for the second for the second game of the doubleheader. So you'll see a lot of different mixing and matching, and I think everyone is just trying to copy the Rays.
2 more. Boston. Matt Barnes, Adam Ottavino. I think it's clearly Matt Barnes. What about you?
They might give Ottavino some chances, but I think he has to prove that he's back up to the task, which I think he can be. But I think at the end of the day, it's probably Barnes' job to lose. He's one of those guys you talked about at the beginning. You can take him later on in drafts and see what it looks like in the first couple weeks.
Right. Ruvain?
Yeah, it's no question. I think it's gonna be Matt Barnes. Ottavino wasn't even that great. If he can rediscover the way his slider was when he was in Colorado, then he has a chance of supplanting Barnes. But otherwise, it's Barnes' job to lose.
Hector Neris has had a lot of saves in Philadelphia the last couple years, and he's still around. Is Philadelphia going to give him it, or are they going to pass the torch on to Archie Bradley, or are they going to do some kind of share and have Kinsler and Alvarado in the mix as well? What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, it's funny. I think how quickly we forget that once after Hector Neris came back from, I think it was a demotion in 2019, he had I believe it was a pretty electric second half of the season. He had a near 2.5 ERA. He was striking out dudes left and right. I believe it was his splitter that was just working for him. So I think they're going to give him the shot. It's also listen, Archie Bradley is not really a fantastic reliever. You know what I mean?
No,
He's not someone that's really going to knock your socks off. So I wouldn't be surprised if Hector Neris can show that he can find the form that he had in that second half of 2019. I think it's his job to lose.
So Ruvain, what do you do? Do you go after one or the other? What are you doing with the whole Philadelphia situation? Because it's a good situation. I think whoever it's going to be, I don't think it's a situation where they're going to split. I think that we're going to find out it's one of them, and that guy is going to be valuable. So what do you do in that situation?
I think you just bet on Hector Neris because he's been there before. He's been with the team before. Archie Bradley is new. He's much better in the eighth inning. When he was with Arizona, he was an eighth inning guy, and he was a lights out eighth inning guy. He was perfect for that because he's not really a true strikeout guy. Jose Alvarado, on the other hand, coming also from Tampa, he can have electric stuff also. He was the closer for, I think, what was it, a month in Tampa, whatever it was, and he can be a very good closer also. Kinsler was very, very effective in Florida, in Miami last year. So there's a whole bunch of guys, but I think it's Hector Neris. And again, just like the Boston situation, I think it's Hector Neris' job to lose. But I think what they did in Philadelphia is that Philadelphia bullpen was so bad the last couple of years.
Yeah.
They just wanted to try a whole bunch of guys and try to get some more stability just so they know if this guy doesn't work, okay, we actually have a backup to go to someone else.
Yeah, I don't really know what's going to happen. If I had to guess, I'd say Neris, but I don't know, and I'm typically staying away from the Philadelphia situation. I'd rather bet on the Boston situation than the Philadelphia situation this year, and I think it's about the same price as far as what you have to pay to get these closers anyway. So I'll bet on that side. Anything else to add, Alex, in terms of the whole reliever landscape that we have?
No. Good luck.
Yeah, I mean, you need closers, so you can't ignore it. I think that everyone's just in the same boat with what to do. And again, my recommendation is bid on one surefire situation, preferably up top if you can, and just throw a bunch of darts, especially if you're in a shallow league. They're cheaper and they're easy to do. If you're in a little bit deeper league or an AL-only league, all the more reason you got to get that guy up top and throw your darts. There's no reason to pay up for the middle for uncertain situations this year, and the whole middle is uncertain this year.
Yep, you just have to grab the ones that are are going to get the saves in the beginning. They have the job. And at this point, listen, we're drafting. It's still the beginning of March right now, and we're drafting closers as if we know what's going to go on. A lot of these teams haven't even named their closers yet. This is all speculation. We're going on what's happening in the past. We're going on what type of stuff they had in prior years. We don't know if the changing of the quote unquote deadening of the ball is going to do anything. Is it going to make people's sinkers heavier? If it does, Archie Bradley's going to be good. There's certain things that you don't know yet, and we don't know yet whether or not the ball has actually changed, because right now in spring training, the ball's flying out of the park already.
Well, Alex, thank you for coming on the show after a 5.5-hour online auction, which was tough. Usually when we do these, you just go straight through and there's 2 or 3 breaks or so. But we braked for a while because it was being aired on Sirius XM. So we go 3 rounds and break for 10 minutes and do the same thing, and it just dragged on here. And then we had a bunch of technical issues. But thank you for coming on the show. And why don't you tell everybody what you're doing these days for fantasy baseball?
Yeah, Phil, so thanks so much for having me. It was great to be here. And so you can follow me on Twitter at AlexFast8. And then the Sunday Night Baseball broadcasts are fast approaching. You can see my work there on Sunday Night Baseball. I'm going to be doing the pitcher overlays for them, so very excited about that. But until that point, trying to get as many pitching gifts as I can from spring training out into the world. So that's where you'll find me.
Oh, very excited to watch Sunday Night Baseball this year, and my buddy Alex Fast is doing stuff on there, so I'm really excited to watch the show. Ruvain, why don't you plug your stuff?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at MLB Injury Guru, where I'm tweeting out daily updates as they come in from spring training about injuries, who's coming up next. After injuries, you can also catch my weekly article in Roto Bowler, which comes out during season weekly. And right now, it's packed with stuff going on in spring training. And again, if you want to hear more about it, listen to our last podcast with Stefania Bell. She was great. She's a great injury person. And you know what? Injuries happen, especially to closers. Look at Jordan Hicks. He's coming off an injury. He's healthy now. Watch out for that, and just keep following us for more information.
All right, and my name is Ariel Cohen. You can find me at Fangraphs, at Rotoballer, at CBS Sportsline. ATC projections are up. And, hey, prepare for your draft and download them. Follow me on Twitter at ATCNY. And, of course, you can listen to me right here on the Beat the Shift podcast. Once again, Alex Fast, thank you so much for coming on the show. And from all of us here at Beat the Shift, see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.